Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by our friends at Mortal Kombucha. Handcrafted in small batches, Mortal Kombucha is bubbly smooth, super refreshing, and absolutely energizing. A revitalized kombucha energy drink ramped up with some awesome. Visit them at mortalkombucha.com. And on today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, you're wondering why you didn't get the job. You just really want to know, right? Why weren't you selected? You know, at Riderflex, we're a recruiting and consulting firm, so we interview hundreds and hundreds of candidates on a regular basis. We place people in all kinds of industries, all functions, all levels, from the C-suite down to managers, etc. So we deal with candidates all day, every day. A lot of times I'll get an email or a phone call after a search is over, and a candidate will say, hey, why wasn't I selected? Why didn't I get the job? I want to talk about it. I get that pretty regularly. And I understand, right? I understand the question. I get it. You're competitive. You spend a lot of time investing in the search process. You studied the company, you interviewed. And so when it's over, you're like, hey man, I want to know why I didn't get picked. I want to talk about it. So I understand. I want to tell you why you didn't get picked in this episode. And then I want to talk about why you don't get a phone call telling you why you weren't picked. So two things: why you didn't get picked and why you don't get a follow-up a lot of times on why you weren't picked. You ready? Okay, here we go. Why you didn't get picked. Here it is. I'm going to give you A and B. A, they just didn't like you. Style, personality, culture, for whatever reason, it just did not click. That happens. Remember, it's human to human interaction. There's emotions involved, personalities involved. Until robots start hiring people, that's going to have a major factor. So A, for whatever reason, you didn't connect with them. They just didn't like you. B, on why you weren't picked, it was the competition. Somebody else was a closer match. They had more experience. They had better skill sets. They had more, they matched the qualifications better, etc. It was a better resume match. I mean, it was just competition. So B, on why you weren't picked, it's competition. Somebody else just beat you. It happens. Now, are there other reasons why you didn't get picked? Sure, there are. But really, a lot of times it's A or B. They didn't like you or the competition. So that's a quick summary on why you didn't get the job. Now, why don't you get a follow-up? Why don't you get these long conversations from the employer or the recruiter on why you weren't selected? Here's my opinion on why that doesn't happen on a regular basis. Now, it does happen sometimes, but not very often. Here's why. I'm going to give you A, B, and C. You ready? A, the recruiter doesn't tell you because the client didn't tell them. In other words, A, there is no answer. A lot of times there's not an answer. We don't have anything to tell you. The client will call us and say, I'm going with Bobby. I don't like Mary. That's it. They don't give us anything else, even if we try to get it out of them. So, when you're wondering why you don't get a follow-up long phone call from a recruiter on why you weren't selected, a lot of times they just don't have an answer for you. There isn't an answer. They didn't get an answer. So that's A. B, on why you don't get a follow-up phone call. Time. I mean, it's just not physically possible to call 150 candidates and have a 30-minute conversation on why they weren't selected. Just think about it. I mean, the employer, the recruiter, I'm sorry, there's just not enough time. Now, some of you listening to this podcast, you're going to go, oh, well, a great recruiter or a great employer will spend time following up with every single candidate and have a coaching session with them and spend time talking to them on why they weren't selected. No, they won't. Okay. There's not enough time. That's not how it works. I hate to tell you, that's just not how it works. So there's just not enough time. Even if they wanted to, they just can't. There's not enough time. They're busy filling other positions. So time, like it or not. I know some of you aren't going to like that answer, but it's reality. Okay. C. Okay. Remember 3 things here on why you're not getting the follow-up phone call. C is the recruiter, quite frankly, isn't paid to give you career coaching. They're paid by the client most of the time, like most recruiting firms, right? They're paid by the client. Now, there are some services and firms out there that the candidate pays them to find them a job. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's a whole different episode and podcast. But in situations where you're dealing with a recruiting firm that's paid by the client, the company, remember, they aren't paid by each candidate. So there's no monetary reason to spend hours and hours and hours and hours of payroll following up with every single candidate and giving them 30 minutes of career coaching. That's just not how it works. That's not the business model. Now, some firms like ours, Riderflex, do offer what I call candidate services, and you can pay for career coaching and get some resume advice and talk to a career coach that will spend hours with you coaching you. There are those services. Riderflex provides those, but you got to pay for it, right? I mean, you just don't get a lot of free career coaching. That's not how it works. That's not a business model. That's just not how it works. I hate to tell you that. Now, if you have a good enough relationship with the recruiter, and it's a recruiter you've worked with for a long time, and you were a finalist and you spent hours and hours and hours together over a month or two, and you were like one of 3 finalists, and at the very end you weren't picked, I'm sure that recruiter and we at Riderflex, we try to spend a little time with those people talking about why they didn't get it. If there's that much time invested and that big of a relationship happening, we'll try to spend time with those kind of finalists. But for everybody else, for all the people that, just applied or maybe went through a short phone screen and there wasn't a lot of other time invested or a long relationship built there, I'm just telling you, the recruiter just does not have enough minutes in the day to go back to 180 people and have that conversation. They just don't. But like I said, if you make the final 3 or the final 4, a lot of times you're going to get some feedback from the employer or the recruiter on why you weren't selected, at least some. But if you want deep career counseling and coaching, where somebody's going to spend a few hours with you, giving you a bunch of tips and things like that, that's a service that you need to pay for, right? I mean, that's how the business models work. So anyway, I get these questions a lot. I wanted to talk about this topic on the podcast. If you're ever wondering why you email Riderflex and you say, hey, I want to talk about why I wasn't picked. Well, like I said, it's just a matter of time. It's very difficult to get to every single one of those and give out free advice that, quite frankly, we're not paid to do. I know I'm giving it to you straight here. I know some of you don't want to hear this, but it's reality. This is how it works. So anyway, wanted to address the topic. And there is your Riderflex tip of the day. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.